review of the movie God's Not Dead. Okay, so this review is also in text form on the Tumblr in which I review movies called Epiphany's Movie Reviews. So if you don't feel like watching the entire video for me to stand here and sit here and explain to you what I think about the movie God's Not Dead, you can read it in one succinct text post, and that would make everything easier on you, if you choose to go that route. So, this review is going to contain some spoilers, major spoilers, that reveal major plot points in the movie. And, as I said, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this or explored anything like this on my channel. I usually just talk about YouTubers and whatnot, and I've really been wanting to go the route of entertainment reviews for a little while now. Do something other than talk about YouTubers, because that gets monotonous and boring and repetitive at times. So constructive critique is expected, and I will take all the constructive criticism into consideration. Now, excuse me if this review comes off as a little biased. Yes, I am atheist who decided to watch this film out of interest because I heard, wow, it's so bad, and I wanted to see for myself if it was as bad as others said it was, and try to see it with an open mind, and to perceive it from what I thought, without reading any other reviews. I didn't read any movie reviews before watching this film. All I knew was I heard from the grapevine that it was a pretty bad film. So I decided to watch it and review it for myself. So if you're watching this and you haven't seen the film, watch this with caution. Spoiler warning. God's Not Dead. My overall rating of it is a 2 out of 10. This is a movie with a lot of contradiction in parts of the film that could actually become their own movies if the makers of the film thought to do so. It is not only about a college professor, as the trailer of the film might lead you to believe, but it is mostly about the struggles of those who believe in God. If they had renamed the film The Struggles of Believers, then maybe the film would have felt less misleading to me as I was watching it, and more true to what I believe the actual plot of the movie would be, or the central plot of the movie would be. The film's central plot seems to revolve around Josh Wheaton, a college student in a philosophy course that is taught by a militant, ruthless atheist, Professor Radisson, played by Kevin Sorbo. Now, you may or may not know Kevin Sorbo from the movie Hercules, with that one infamous scene, disappointment! Terrible acting there, I know. Let's continue with the review. Radisson begins his first class by telling students that God does not exist, and for 30% of their final grade, to write on a piece of paper, God is dead, with their signature at the bottom. The characters seem to mindlessly accept this, without questioning this move at all. Okay, so we're just going to write on this piece of paper, God is dead, not question it, because, you know, it's not like we're in a philosophy class or anything. But Christian character Wheaton accepts the challenge of debating Professor Radisson on the existence of God, setting up the plot for the film. I'm sorry, but what actual college professor does this? I thought philosophy was about critical and objective thinking, not about mindlessly accepting an idea that is laid out by a professor. I always thought philosophy was about questioning everything around you and trying to explain theories and arguing theories. And I thought it was more about the critical and objective thinking. You know, I would have expected more students in the classroom, being that it's a philosophy class, to stand against him and argue his ideas. The idea of God and theories would be explored in a philosophy class more objectively, and it would not be portrayed as an absolute. It would rather be portrayed as a theory, from what I've heard about philosophy. Philosophy itself is not, nor will it ever be, absolute. If this were a real-life philosophy class, the ideas would be explored, and more intelligent thought as to what the gods, or God, is, was, and or represents. But the sake of this film, they mindlessly accept the absolute. And as an atheist, I'm already upset by the fact that atheists in this film are openly portrayed as rude and inconsiderate people. Professor Radisson is portrayed throughout the film as pompous and very self-righteous and very into himself. And there is even a scene where Professor Radisson confronts Wheaton after the first debate in the classroom and states to Wheaton, okay, there is a God in this classroom, and it's me. That's very, very self-absorbed for a philosophy professor, and for any professor to be that self-absorbed. And he says to make it his personal mission to basically fail the student. Get off the desk. Sorry. Gosh, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. For any professor to basically say it's their mission to fail a student just because they disagree on beliefs. Philosophy is about disagreeing on beliefs and discussing them. Not necessarily getting into huge arguments about them, but philosophy is just that. It's a philosophy. The class is all about theories. Why do you want to have an absolute when the entire class is about arguing theories, basically? I don't know, I haven't been in a college philosophy course, so correct me if I am wrong. Other religions, people of other religions, are portrayed as rude and inconsiderate as well. Basically, anybody who isn't a Christian or born-again Christian is portrayed as this horrible, horrendous, evil character. As will be explored later in this review, there is a Muslim father who abuses his daughter for being Christian. There is an atheist businesswoman named Amy who is diagnosed with cancer and is dumped by her abusive boyfriend and is portrayed as selfish and a person who makes snarky, offensive comments to anyone who is Christian. For instance, when she is backstage at a Newsboys concert, she says to them that they will go out and sing about God and Jesus as if they are as real as you and me. And the Newsboys reply with, well, to us, they are real. They say that almost as if they're better than everyone for believing in God. Which I actually kind of feel bad for the Christian camp, because I know that there are not Christians that are like this and act like they're better than everyone. No one faith is better than the other faith. Let them believe whatever they want. Unless they're getting in your face about it, it's none of your business. I went off on a tangent there, but back to the review. Wheaton's girlfriend, Kara, who was portrayed by Cassidy Guilford, who has been dating Josh Whedon for 6 years, dumps Wheaton over debating Radisson on the existence of God. Some good girlfriend she is. I mean, you've been dating this guy for 6 years and you're going to dump him over something as silly and simple as debating a teacher? Come on, I find that ridiculous. For the short time that her character is in the film, she is incredibly controlling, almost to the point of insanity. Like this character, if this character had a movie made about them, I would expect it to be a movie where she secretly murders and names puppies, because she came off to me as that creepy and controlling. She says to Wheaton, we've been dating for 6 years, going on forever. Really? Forever? The both of you are in college. You are not ready for forever if you are going to dump your boyfriend for such a minuscule reason as debating a professor on the existence of God. And if you feel that your boyfriend's spending a lot of time on the research, then you might want to just kindly talk to him about it and not come off as too controlling and try not to make it all about you, as the character seems to have done in this movie. I wish that Josh would have dumped her in the beginning for being such an asshole. If this guy wants to follow his faith, let him go right ahead and follow it and debate it. Also, the anti-Muslim moments in this movie are ridiculous and completely offensive. If I were a Muslim and I was watching this movie, I would have gotten up out of the theater and walked out. These moments were completely uncalled for. The Muslim college student gets kicked out of her house by her father for secretly being Christian, trying to make the Muslim characters in this movie, the 2 or 3 of them that there are, look horrible. It has nothing to do with the central plot of the film, and it seems to only be in the film for the sole purpose, for making the Christians in the film look like the good guys, and for making the Muslims and people of any other faith look completely evil. I mean, you had to have seen the way that her father kicks her out of the house. First, he slaps her onto the bed, and then seems to drag her out of bed and practically chokes the girl, all for being of a different faith than he. And the girl is crawling back onto the floor and seems terrified of her father. How can anybody not view that as offensive? It has nothing to do with a boy trying to have a debate with a professor over the existence of God. I noticed that. Throughout the film, a lot of terrible things seem to happen to the Christians rather than the atheists. Radisson explains to Wheaton that during an in-class debate, that the reason that he hates God was because his mother died of cancer when he was a very young age. Wheaton basically replies with, "How can you hate something that doesn't exist? That you don't believe exists?" With that line, the entire class suddenly, and mindlessly, I might add, turns against the angst-ridden professor and proclaims that God isn't dead. Radisson finds himself beside himself in renewed grief, sifting through the God is dead signatures that he received at the very beginning of the film, when he opens up a desk drawer and finds a rather harrowing letter written by his mother to him before he died, essentially stating that she's really upset by the fact that she would never see him grow up, and that she knew God and the Lord had better plans for him in life. Sorvo's character in this film seems inspired by this letter enough to get up and head to the Newsboys concert, Newsboys being a Christian rock band, and while he is walking there, a torrential rainfall pours and a thunderstorm ensues. En route to this concert, Radisson is hit by a car and dies within minutes of getting hit because of injuries. But before he dies, he gets saved by Pastor Dave, portrayed by David A.R. White, who comforts him about being afraid of death, which is natural for any human, by telling him all about Jesus while he's dying. I'm sorry, but where was the medical help in this film? There's not one medical professional on scene that tries to help this man in a car accident. There are a few people calling for 911, but you don't really see any active medical professionals on the scene in this film going to help Professor Radisson. So he's basically left to die. Try as they might to get the medical help, the medical professionals around him, if there were any, I thought that there were at the time of writing this review, but they can't seem to help the ailing and dying professor. Right before Radisson dies, he gives his life over to God when, David White goes and saves him. And do the filmmakers, after this death scene, try to address his death in any sort of meaningful way? Do they tell the concertgoers at the Newsboys concert, "Hey, your professor just died, but in the moments before he died, he turned himself over to God"? Like, if I were writing a Christian movie, I would have probably included that, to prove the point that God isn't dead, and even when the believers or non-believers are dying, they can still turn themselves over to God. If I were a Christian and writing this film, I would have included that. it would have incorporated and proved even more that God isn't dead to the Christians. I think, aside from being, the right move to do, it just would have fit in the context of the film in the end. Despite how horribly he died, the answer to this question, do they address his death in a meaningful way, is no. Fuck no. They just decide to flat out kill the convert without any meaningful way of addressing his death. A funeral scene reflecting the death of Radisson would have been nice. Maybe even a mention of his conversion before death and a moment of silence and prayer for the recently fallen professor would have been nice. But do they do this? No, they party and jam out to a song called God's Not Dead like nothing happened. Like nobody died. Like Professor Radisson's existence in this film just flat out meant nothing. They don't attempt to address this in any way possible. Why? Because he was atheist throughout the film. But he converted to Christianity on his deathbed, which adds to the notion that there's a lot of shitty things that happen to Christians in this film, and to atheists alike. There's crappy things that happen to both sides in this film. Why was Radisson killed without any meaningful mention of his death? It seems this way because he was an atheist throughout the movie. However, it was suggested that he's only atheist because he was upset with God for taking his mother's life in the most cruel ways, which was terminal cancer. After watching this film, I've concluded that there was basically no way to walk away from it with ambivalence, without some sort of bias or strong feelings. One way or the other. You'll either find it really offensive and atrocious, or you will find this movie to be great and a great way to tell people about God and faith. There's no in-between, at least the way I see it. Now let's see all the bad things that happens to Christians in this film. One of them gets beaten up for their faith and kicked out by their father for not being the faith that he wants her to be. That's incredibly spiteful. A girl dumps a boy for her faith, and the professor's mother, who is implied to be heavily Christian, dies of cancer. However, a lot of truly awful things also happen to the atheist camp, which the atheist professor gets hit by a car on his way to a concert and subsequently dies after being converted to Christianity, and the atheist reporter is diagnosed with cancer, in which she could possibly die. She is dumped then. Upon finding this out, she is dumped by her business-concerned boyfriend, who I guess doesn't want a girl with cancer, which is incredibly selfish. I don't even know why they included this businessman and subplot Amy in the film. I guess the only reason that subplot Amy exists in the film was to make atheists look bad, which, again, makes a lot of people think that this film is a propaganda film. Like myself, this movie serves as a propaganda film against atheists, mainly for the movie's portrayal of atheists and for the majorly horrible things that occur to them, even as they convert to Christianity. As for the arguments made during the debate by Wheaton, they are straw men at best. For example, there is an argument where he tries to prove that there's God. The one where he argues that there isn't proof of a God, but there's no proof that there isn't a God. Seems like the beginning of Pascal's wager. Another one that was made a lot was, how can something come from nothing? Well, it came from, according to the Big Bang Theory, an explosion of matter. And the Earth has formed over billions and billions of years. We came from space. And there's no definite answer to this. There's not going to be a definite answer to this. Not in my lifetime. Probably not in the next few lifetimes, but as long as science is advancing, we get closer and closer to finding out what probably happened. And there's also another one that was made that, how can you hate something that does not exist? Again, the character, Professor Addison, is implied to have believed in God before this event occurred. If I believed in God, and he took my mom by terminal cancer, such a horrible, degenerative way to die, I would feel outraged for what has happened to me and lash out at the God I believed in for putting me in that predicament. I mean, Kevin Sorbo's character was implied to be extremely young when this happened. About 12 years old? Some sort of teenage angst written in there with being so young. And at that age, you don't even really understand death. You barely do not you barely understand yourself. How is one that young expected to understand death? I understand where his anger comes from. And I actually felt pretty sorry for him. There's also a bit of filler in this film. You get guest appearances by Willie Robertson and his wife of Duck Dynasty, a show that has gained major controversy over the family praying to God in every episode, which is a silly controversy, in my opinion. In the video, there are situations that seem to have nothing to do with the central plot that revolves around the professor and the college student. Like the businessman's dementia-stricken grandmother, who he seems to treat like absolute shit. As I said before, The Struggles of Believers would have been a far more fitting title for this film. The too long, didn't read version of this is God's Not Dead is an anti-atheist, anti-Muslim film that utilizes straw man arguments in weak situations to get the viewer to support Christianity. My overall review of this is that this movie is a 2 out of 10 for me, and I would not watch this again. Thank you guys for watching this review. I hope it didn't seem too horrible. I don't hate Christians. I just really hate the way this film is made. If you liked it, thumbs up. If you have any constructive critique of the film or of my review of the film, comment. If you don't like this, thumbs down or whatever. And hopefully I can make this more of a thing on my channel. And this review is running way, way over time, far more than I imagined it would run. But, you know, it's a process, it's a review. I'm Epiphany, and I hope you have a good night, morning, afternoon, whatever time you're watching this. Hats off to you. E. Thomas Videos. Enter Dreamer Teenager. Thank you for supporting this. Have a nice day.